The space race was a competition between the Soviet Union and the U.S. to see who could become the strongest nation during the Cold War. It was a battle between the two most powerful nations.
If they could launch a satellite into space, they could launch missiles too, and there would be countless advances in other areas of technology. At the time, the tensions between the two were rough due to multiple periods of mistrust.
This race was for both military and political power. The victor of the race would become the strongest nation in the world.
The time period after World War II was known as the Cold War. It was the time in which the race began.
The birth of the space age started with the Soviet Union. They launched the Sputnik up into orbit aboard an ICBM missile on October 4th, 1957. It was the first artificial satellite in space.
Immediately afterwards, the United States decided to allocate their resources into the development of a satellite. They saw the threat and the money spent would also help to advance technology.
So the Mercury project began and signaled their entrance into the race. Its goal, to put a man into space safely.
On November 3rd of the same year, the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik 2, containing Laika the rocket dog, proving that life could survive in space and extending the lead.
In December of the same year, the United States of America attempted to launch the Vanguard, but it exploded on launch and was unsuccessful.
In another attempt from behind, the U.S. launched Explorer 1 with the Jupiter C rocket, developed by Dr. Wernher von Braun on January 31st of the following year.
3 years later, the Soviet Union launched Yuri Gagarin into space. He was the first man to reach space safely as well as orbit the entire planet.
At this point, the Soviet space program was unmatched, but as time went on, they became obsessed with propaganda and fell behind in other areas. They racked up achievement after achievement.
They were the first to send a living thing into space, and to send a man into space. They beat America into the first spacecraft to fully orbit the Earth, and they beat them to many other achievements as well.
So, later that year, in May, the United States launched Freedom 7 with astronaut Alan Shepard as its cargo. The goal was to assess the capabilities of humans in space. Though he was the first American man in space, he did not complete a full orbit, as Yuri Gagarin did.
America was trying to keep up with the Soviets, but they were desperate. It was obvious to them that they stood little chance in many areas of space. The Soviet Union was far more advanced.
So they moved all their resources to a single focus, one which the Soviets had not yet begun.
The moon.
The Apollo project began with John F. Kennedy's speech at Rice University in 1962.
We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. For space science, like nuclear science and all technology, has no conscience of its own. Whether it will become a force for good or ill depends on man. And only if the United States occupies a position of preeminence can we help decide whether this new ocean will be a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of war. I do not say that we should or will go unprotected against the hostile misuse of space, any more than we go unprotected against the hostile use of land or sea. But I do say that space can be explored and mastered without feeding the fires of war, without repeating the mistakes that man has made in extending his writ around this globe of ours. There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
The first rocket, Apollo 1, crewed with Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaff, was burned on the launch pad on January 1967. Astronauts killed.
One astronaut was heard saying, "Fire, I smell fire," with the response a few seconds later of fire in the cockpit. But by then, it was too late. The fire blazed quickly through the oxygen-filled environment.
After the incident, the rockets up to Apollo 6 were all unmanned test flights to check for structural integrity. They had decided that safety came first.
The Apollo 7 craft was the first man-launched since the Apollo 1. It was to display the performance of the crew, rocket, command module, and mission support.
Apollo 8 was launched on December 21, 1968. Its goal was to take men around the moon and assess the data gathered.
The Apollo 9's goal was to assess the operation of the lunar module.
Apollo 10 was a run-through of the lunar landing, precisely as it would have been performed.
Then it was time to land a man on the moon. The spacecrafts 1 through 10 were all for the goal of reaching the moon.
Apollo 11 was launched on July 16, 1969. After 10 launches of preparation, America had finally put a man on the moon.
The infamous quote from the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, states, "One small step for man, one large step for mankind." Meanwhile, the Soviets were experiencing multiple failures in their attempt to land a man on the moon.
Once the United States landed their man on the moon, the race was over. There was no greater form of propaganda.
With the Soviets defeated, the opportunity for cooperation arose. It was a means of restoring the relations that had deteriorated due to the rivalry between the United States and them. The Soviets reluctantly accepted. They knew that their reign of technology was over.
The next question appeared. What was next? It was a challenge. The United States took up the development of the space shuttle, and the Soviets chose the task of putting Soviets in space for an extended period of time.
However, the first real co-op project was the Apollo-Soyuz project, which was a project to dock a ship on a satellite.
America took it up to explore the outer reaches of our solar system, and the Soviets extensively explored the planet of Venus.
Since then, the U.S.-Soviet cooperation has been shaky. Diplomatic ties have been hard to establish, and when they do, they last for only a few years.